Welcome back to another episode of the Mono Radio. My name is Kim Peterson, and today Sean is on board as well. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you very much, Kimbo.
I'm trying to do an intro just so everyone can differentiate who's on it.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not watching it. That makes it easier.
Yeah. I don't think we have very similar voices, but you never know. I feel like it's polite to throw my name up there.
It sort of makes like a definitive start as well, because we just go from chatting to like, now we're in this. And if you don't do an intro, it's like a really blurred line.
Yeah.
Like you sort of just, okay, now we're talking.
It's harder than you think, though, to come up with an intro.
Oh, yeah.
That was probably my best one.
My name's Sean.
Yeah. Just saying my name in the show and then boom, we started. Okay, so we finished the Olympic weightlifting classes this week. So I thought, hey, let's do a podcast about Olympic weightlifting. Both myself and Sean has been big fans of weightlifting since the early days of CrossFit. Probably a big part of why we fell in love with CrossFit as well, is the barbell. So no definitive kind of strategy on the podcast and what to talk about, except for the line throughout is going to be Olympic weightlifting.
I like it.
The theme.
I like it.
So my first question is, when did you start doing Olympic weightlifting, just specifically with Olympic weightlifting?
So obviously I got exposed to Olympic weightlifting through CrossFit when I first started, which is just it's vastly different now looking back.
Rob Dalton showed you a few snatch techniques.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
We love Rob, but
can't
snatch that well.
And to be fair, like he was so early to the game. Like no
one could do it.
No one could do it. I remember him putting Jess to a weightlifting coach in maybe 2011, and it was unheard of for someone to have a weightlifting coach in CrossFit. Like it was just like seemed like no point to do that at all. But yeah, I was exposed to like Olympic weightlifting through CrossFit, which now in hindsight, you realize just how drastically different those two things are. Like we incorporate Olympic weightlifting styles into CrossFit, but very rarely do we practice as Olympic weightlifters or train as Olympic weightlifters. They're so different. And then I think it just naturally became one of my strengths in CrossFit, like the barbell. Do you know what I mean? Like heavy barbell, short rep range, and then it just and I think you sort of gravitate to things that you're good at. So then I started going into that, and then the line became blurred maybe in sort of 2014, 15, where CrossFitters started to transition over into weightlifting. Like there was a bunch of us that like went and started doing weightlifting comps and started
outlaw.
Yeah, the outlaw way, definitely. Like he helped with that heaps. But then it was like you go to an Olympic weightlifting competition and there's CrossFitters there. And that was before that was unheard of. And then it was like an influx of CrossFitters starting to do weightlifting comps. So probably 2014, 15 was when I really started to do it. Then I joined Triumph Weightlifting, started doing that. And then down in Melbourne as well with Zach and the boys down there. Like I went down there a few times. Phoenix Weightlifting Club. Yeah, I went down there and lifted with them a fair bit. So that's when I really started to like delve into weightlifting specifically, and then I stopped doing CrossFit altogether and just trained weightlifting for about 18 months.
Because you wanted to compete as well, right?
Yep. Yeah. I was like, at the time for my weight division under 77s, there wasn't like that many really strong guys. There's a guy called Francois Etude, I think I'm saying that right. He's and he was in 77s, and he was just like in his own league. Yeah. He was so far like gone.
Yeah.
I can't remember his lifts, but they were significantly better than anyone else in that 77 weight class. And then I knew that like the Commonwealth Games and stuff were coming up, and like it had a long time. And then when I first started weightlifting, my progression was so steep. Like I got really good really quick. I was thinking, right, if this sort of hangs around, do you mean I might have a chance of like scraping in that second spot? Because the way they used to pick the spots is like one person in each division, then they have like a floating person, and I could sort of I wanted to be around that mark. Never expected to be picked, but sort of around that mark. So then that's what I was training towards. And then I just did a bunch of comps like nationals and state and stuff like that. Yeah. Luckily, Francois never came to any of those.
Oh, you didn't compete against him?
No,
I didn't know that.
Never once. No.
Yeah.
So
I've seen him lifting, but
I've seen him lift, yeah.
In comps.
But I never was in the same comp as him, which was great because
you would look so much smaller than him.
Oh, yeah.
He looks like he is 95 kilos.
I don't know, like, I don't know how he gets to 77.
Yeah.
Like it just, when you look at him, he's so thick and like,
Muscly.
it makes no sense. But he was very, very good. He's in the 77 category. He was miles above anyone else.
So before we get into the comps that you did, talk about how weightlifting training is different to CrossFit training. When was your realization that okay, I'm not doing Metcons anymore and I'm just kind of snatching, clean and jerking and squatting basically? And like, how was that transition for you?
It was really apparent like first session. So walking into a weightlifting club and it goes out of just the training. Like the vibe is different. The way you approach your sessions are different. The characters that are attracted to weightlifting tend to be really introverted and quiet and sort of really they like to be by themselves and in their own minds. So straight off the bat, it was like, right, this is drastically different to what I'm used to.
Great fit for your personality.
Oh yeah, like I
So
stuck out
opposite.
like a sore thumb. You know what I mean? Like I was dancing and screaming and yeah, didn't fit in one bit with that.
Were you cheering on other weightlifters in training and thought that was like a nice thing to do?
Yeah, like I was watching dudes that I haven't seen hit weights before. You know what I mean? Like some of the heavier dudes hitting. Do you know what I mean? They hit a 140 kilo stat, and I was like, whoa! I was like, that was sick. And they like look over and they're, who is this moron? You know, like I was just like pumped for him. And I was like, oh, okay, we don't do that here. All right. Because in CrossFit, high five, you might even go give the guy a hug. You know what I mean? But not in weightlifting. So that was the big difference. And then the training was so vastly different in the respect of like your rest periods and like how you approach your session. So you're looking at like maximum sort of intensity and aggression and speed for as little time as possible, as little loading as possible, and then and really submaximal. I think that's the big thing that people get wrong with what they think weightlifting is. They think that you get to go heavy all the time. Like when I was weightlifting, I might have got to like a heavy single maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Like that was
outside of competitions or including competitions?
Sorry, outside of comps. Yeah, outside of comps in training, you might go to a heavy single 2 times a year in training, and then you spend so much time at, do you know what I mean, the 50 to 80% range. You spend an enormous amount of time there just drilling the same things over and over and over again. Like it's just a war of attrition. Like you just have to keep doing the small, minute things perfect for long periods of time, and then you might, when you go heavy, you might have got better.
Yeah,
it's really, really
So
difficult. Yeah, whereas CrossFit, we tend to just do like we have to go heavier, quicker. You know what I mean? And then like we forgive a lot of things, and there's different ways to lift as well. Like especially if you're doing touch and goes and stuff like that in workouts, it's just so different.
a thing that I always tell CrossFitters with weightlifting, it's you don't go heavy when you kind of want to go heavy in training, but then when you don't really want to go heavy in comps, that's when they just tell you, well, you got to put 5 kilos more on that bar. And I was like, I've never done it. Well, but this is the time of the year to hit it.
Yeah.
Like, fuck.
Yeah.
Whereas in training, you're like, oh, I've hit like 30 reps at this weight at 50%. I'm like nailing it. Like, let me keep putting weight on the bar. Like, nah. That's when you want to do it. And then you come to comp and it's like my comp, I missed my first 2 snatches and Marty just kept going up in weight.
Oh God.
I was like, wait, I haven't hit anything yet.
That is so scary.
Yeah. And if you don't hit the 3rd one, you're out.
You're out of the comp.
Yeah.
That's it.
Luckily,
Thanks
I hit
for coming.
the 3rd one, but yeah.
So miss, got your 3rd,
Yeah.
and you cleaner jerks?
Yeah, I got all my clean and jerks.
Okay.
Oh, no, not the last one. So this was early days for me. Marty threw me straight in, weightlifting suit and everything. And then I did 50 kilo snatch, missed it. 55, missed it. 60, hit it. And then I can't remember my clean and jerk weights, but I do remember they were under 100. Well, under 100 kilos. Took me ages to hit 100 kilo clean and jerk. But yeah, that's I kind of say that a bit with CrossFit as well, right? It's often people want to go a bit gung-ho with the lifting or whatever, like the earlier in the session when the skill level is high. But then when they're on the bike or the rower or it's burpees or wall balls and then like you tell them to push, then like, I don't really want to push here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good way to approach it as well. It's funny with like with Olympic weightlifting, when you're in a competition and they'll say this on every level from beginner all the way through to the Olympics, at a competition, that is the worst lifts you'll see those people do. As in, like they're putting it all out on the line. Like they're flirting with not only their like maximal lifts, but sometimes above what they're capable of.
Yeah.
So that's when you see them walking out jerks off the platform, and you know what I mean? Like sitting into the squat receiving position way deeper than usual. And like at an Olympic weightlifting comp, that's the worst lifts you'll see that person do all year, because all year they practice perfection at lighter weights.
Yeah.
And then when they get to a comp, exactly like you said, it's like, right now it's testing time. And at the end of the day, it's a competition. So you do whatever you can to like save that lift.
Yeah.
Like you will grind through a really deep, horrible squat.
Yeah.
Whereas in training, you'd never let yourself get to that point.
Bounce out of it quick.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely at like weightlifting comps, that's the worst you'll see of that person.
And it's crazy when you think about it, because so often we see amazing lifts at like max weight for Olympic weightlifters at comps.
Yeah.
Like in the Olympics and World Champs, some of the lifts, like when hook grip does the 3 snatches like side to side, from their opener to the middleweight to the third, and sometimes it just looks identical.
It's insane.
Yeah.
To the
If anything, sometimes gets better.
Yeah, to the millimeter.
Yeah.
Like weightlifting is, I can't remember where I heard this, but weightlifting's milliseconds and millimeters. Like that's what you're measuring, and like the difference between that at that level is so small between a world record and a failed lift. Like it is so small, the difference. It's
and then
crazy.
you see every CrossFitter commenting and just like, oh, that looked easy. You got more on. Hold on, he just did a world record.
Yeah, it is probably the worst thing I reckon a weightlifter could hear. It's like, oh, you made that look so easy.
Yeah, put another 10 kilos.
Yeah, it's like, because 3,000 reps of practice went into making that look easy. It's like if you're grinding and you make it look hard, that's not good.
Yeah. So I always kind of like to think about the listener, and for some of the listeners here, they might not even know the the difference between Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting. Because Olympic lifting is really just 2 lifts, but in training you do a couple more, and then powerlifting is 3 lifts. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so Olympic weightlifting is your clean and jerk and snatch, and it's like super explosive. So it's probably one of the fastest sports in the world, is in like the time frame. And then powerlifting, you've got bench press, squat, and deadlift, and that's just like maximal load across all 3 lifts. And then obviously Olympic weightlifting, clean and jerk, snatch, maximal lift. You get 3 lifts on each at a comp, and it's like a forever climbing bar. So bar starts at one weight, and then depending on what weight the bar goes, depends on what order the person comes out.
And it never goes back down.
Never goes down.
Comps.
In comps, yep. So if you miss a lift, you either get to hit that same lift again, or the barbell goes up. So there's actually almost zero crossover between the two. Like say even an Olympic weightlifter squats a lot. A powerlifter, it's one of their events. They squat for like maximal load, but the style of squatting, like a low bar back squat in powerlifting versus like a high bar back squat, the guys that just did our Olympic lifting classes that we just went through, they learnt the difference. But there's virtually no crossover between the 2 sports whatsoever, and that's why CrossFit found such a great spot in the market. It's because like people like you and I and everyone in here, it's like, I want to do a bit of powerlifting. Like I like bench.
Yeah.
I don't.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. I don't want to just do you know what I mean, high bar, fast back squats all the time. I want to be able to like load that bar up and do a slow, grindy, low bar back squat. But yeah, very, very different sports and virtually no crossover between the two. It's almost like, I would say it's like soccer and football, you know what I mean? They both have a ball, and that's about the only similarities. They both got barbells. Everything else is completely different.
So what was the appeal to you where you were leaning more towards Olympic lifting compared to powerlifting, besides naturally kind of being better at it?
Yeah, I think just the skill level, like it's such a high skill. Not saying powerlifting hasn't got skill, like it does, but it's a different different sort of levels of coordination. You know what I mean? To pull a barbell off the ground in a deadlift and have that long period of time versus having 0.3 of a second to sit under a snatch. I think it was just the level of coordination and skill required, like that captured me because like I really like high skill acquisition sports. If it's really, really tough and technical, that sort of attracts me to it. Whereas I feel like with powerlifting, it's a little bit slower of a sport, a little bit less skill acquisition, and it comes down to a lot of just like goes purely off strength base. In weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting, someone could be significantly stronger than me, and I can definitely outlift them purely because their skill acquisition is nowhere near as high as a lighter person. So that attracted me to weightlifting. It was just how much skill is involved.
Yeah. There's a much bigger requirement for your mobility as well, like being able to sit at the bottom of an overhead squat. That's not a lot of people can do that, really.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's funny because that is... you're right. Not a lot of people can do that, but with CrossFit, it was like, it's sort of like
Everyone's
an expectation. It was like, well, it's a no rep.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, this is such a high level movement that like requires so much flexibility, stabilization, strength, you know, but like we throw it into a WOD and it's like, everyone's got to do it. Whereas if you were to walk into an Olympic weightlifting sort of club, early days, and like you're not overhead squatting. Weightlifters don't overhead squat, but you're not getting into that position for a long time until you can sort of prove that you can do it.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So do you remember the first time you went into Marty or whatever weightlifting coach was your first coach? Do you remember what assessment he did and how he looked at you and like what kind of work he did? And I think the first session is roughly like 2 hours of just a barbell, right?
Yeah, I actually went into my first session and they had seen me lift. Like they asked me to come in for a session. We're at a comp and they had Kiana there at a comp.
Yep.
And they said, oh, you should come in and try some weightlifting because they had seen me like in the comp hit like a cleaner jerk, I think it was. And then I went in for the first session and I was like, I remember like, went to bed early the night before, like ate heaps well that day. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to go in and like hit something everyone super heavy. You know what I mean? Like, watch this. And then,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I was quick to learn. I walked in and he like hands me a dowel and I'm like traditionally I'm pretty tired anyway. And he's like, oh, show me, go into a rack position. And with my dowel, I'm like out in front of me, like it's parallel to my nose. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm like, couldn't really do it. And then he showed me, all right, onto an empty barbell. What do you think about where are your hands, where are your feet? What's your positioning off the ground? Where do you like to strike? And I was like, I didn't have the answers to any of that. Like I was just sort of, so it was just dragged me all the way back to never have done it. As in like my answer should have been like, I've never lifted I've never done a cleaner jerk. I don't know what a snatch is. And that should have been my answer because that's pretty much where my education level was, what felt like when you're dealing with like high level lifting. It was like,
absolutely.
I knew a cleaner jerk, like catch on your shoulders, you stand it up and then you jerk it, you know what I mean? Hopefully you don't have to press it out. That was sort of where I was at.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my first session was just a huge regression. It was just, right, let's go all the way back to how to squat, all the way back to how to hold a barbell. And then it was build from there and it was slow.
Yeah. Do you remember any takeaways that you had from that session? Did you like leave and be like, shit, I never thought of that. That was helpful.
Like,
it's a while ago.
Yeah, it's hard to answer because like you're always with weightlifting, it's never the same cues. So like my big takeaways from weightlifting now compared to probably what I thought then was like drastically different. I do remember one of the biggest early takeaways was I couldn't believe how fast people were.
Yeah.
That was something that I thought I had seen someone move fast. And then when I walked into a weightlifting club, I remember that being like a massive difference. I was like, oh,
speed.
I was like, fuck, that's that's the speed that this is meant to be executed at. Because it was like you can be like fast, in a CrossFit sense, as in like, and I don't mean fast as in like hitting fast touch and goes. I mean like one lift. You know what I mean?
Speed under the bar.
Yeah, and then I saw that in real life with some high level lifters, and I was like, okay, that is an enormous difference to what I'm used to. Yeah,
and you're considered a fast CrossFitter, I would say, with your lift, like with your Olympic lift. And probably similar with me. It's like, sometimes when people see me lift in the class, they're like, oh, like it looks fast.
Yeah.
But like you haven't seen in real life what even a state level lifter looks like, let alone a national lifter in the States or, in China, something looks like live. Like it is like mesmerizing.
Oh, it makes no sense.
It's hard to understand what happened. And then the bar is
it defies gravity, like the way they do it. And as well, and I talk about this quite a lot, but the way they move the barbells from 50% of their 1 rep max, the speed and aggression that they treat these barbells with all the way through. Like what they do, when you see a good weightlifter move an empty barbell, it is like, it's
Sick.
amazing.
Yeah.
You give a moderately good weightlifter a barbell, an empty barbell, and you can't see the difference. You can't see the difference between a moderately good and like an okay CrossFitter. It's like they sort of just do the same movement.
They go through the motions.
Yeah. You give a high-level weightlifter an empty barbell, they can entertain you for like half an hour. It's amazing to watch. Their body awareness is just so high that they can move around that thing so fast.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was my biggest takeaway from early days. It was like the speed.
I remember when I discovered Hook Grip and All Things Gym, and you got to see these videos of top-level Olympic lifters warming up with a barbell, and the video was like 20 minutes. And I'd watch it 5 times. I'm like, what is going on? It's so sick to watch the good guys do that.
Remember when we got into sort of weightlifting and even CrossFit, it was a really hidden sport. So there was, because like I was saying before, a lot of people are introverted and it's like very secretive, and each person's training style is very like held close to their chest.
I guess that was a culture, right?
Yeah.
To keep all the numbers under wraps.
Yep. And then All Things Gym and Hook Grip came out, and they got these like access to behind the scenes and the warm up areas, and they started doing these videos, and it was like, oh my God, like we get to see someone go from an empty barbell all the way up to their opening lift on video. That was unheard of before then. You didn't get to see that stuff, which is my favorite thing to watch.
So good.
Yeah. Watching them hit their lift on the platform is very impressive, obviously, like the best guys in the world. But watching them warm up is the best.
Yeah. The lift on the platforms kind of becomes a bit irrelevant for what we're trying to do, because it's just so many levels above what we're doing. But the warm-up you can replicate with an empty barbell.
Yeah.
Especially all the movements, and obviously not the speed, but you can work towards it, right? Like your footwork, your extensions and stuff like that. And it's so good.
Yeah, it's way more relatable for me to see a guy snatch 70 kilos super fast and clean, and then I can relate to that. But when I see Lu Xiaojin hit 220, you know what I mean, on his like squat jerk, I'm like,
that'll
that's
never
not
happen.
Relatable. You know what I mean? Like I pull that off the ground in a deadlift over 4 seconds.
Yeah. It is true though what you said about how the sport went from being totally underground and not really having any exposure to the outside world, and then with the growth of social media, it kind of turned into this perfect sport for Instagram and for Facebook videos and stuff, because it's such short lifts.
Yep.
So you can watch a clip again and again, like say a 20-second clip of someone lifting, and it just loops on Instagram or on Facebook, and people go like froth over that.
It definitely fits our attention span at the moment. When you're scrolling through and you just see someone hit a snatch, and it's in 1.5 seconds from start to finish.
So good.
Like so impressive in that instant sort of time frame. Yeah, it is. It's really good for that. But it's its own worst enemy, weightlifting, because they pushed back against it for so long, and they really tried to make it an exclusive club. And there's a bit of like a hierarchy in there, and that they sort of had all the answers and all the secrets. And it's only until the last few years, really, that they've realized that there's a really big talent pool of people that could be really good at weightlifting. They got exposed to it through different avenues. So I'll just use CrossFit as an example. They might have done CrossFit for 3 or 4 years and then realized how much they love clean and jerk and snatch. Yeah. And this guy's a really talented athlete. But in years prior, it was like, oh, you're a CrossFitter. Yeah. We don't want anything to do with you. Whereas now they look across and they're, actually, these guys have really good work ethic, and they're like sponges. CrossFitters just want to learn. The more you tell them, the more they pay attention to you. So then they realize, okay, there's a talent pool here that we could pull from. And I think with the years to come, they will probably see some guys that got introduced to CrossFit maybe when they were 16 or 17. And then when they're 25, they're going to be very, very good Olympic weightlifters. I think we haven't quite seen that yet, but I think it's to come. Yeah,
I think the best example right now is Maddie Rogers, because she started as a CrossFitter, but now when you look at her, and if you followed her for the last few years, you almost forget that she started as a CrossFitter. Yeah. Because she's completely converted, and she's lifting at world-class level.
Yeah,
she came second. She's got the
American records. Yeah. I think she got American clean jerk snatch and total. Yeah. I think she got all 3 records, which is amazing. Ridiculous. Yeah. But that's a great example of someone coming from a different talent pool, whereas 5, 6, even probably longer, say 8 years ago, if she was to walk into a Olympic weightlifting gym with her like Reebok like apparel on, and it's like, oh no thanks, we don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah. So. I mean, I trained with Marty for a year and a bit, and I think I had some friends that already trained there, so they gave me advice before I came in for my first session. And I didn't tell him that I did CrossFit for definitely not the first 6 months. It might have been 8 to 10 months before I told him. And I didn't wear a CrossFit shirt at training.
Didn't talk about it.
Yeah, I didn't say anything about CrossFit at all until later on. But he kind of embraced it eventually too. Yeah.
I think he was smart enough to realize that it was the best thing to do.
Especially for his business.
Oh, definitely for his business. He used to run seminars and stuff like that. But although it was probably frustrating for him at times because all of a sudden his Olympic weightlifting club was full of CrossFitters and we were talking about the CrossFit Games constantly, and like then someone would say,
100 Metcons a week.
Yeah. And then exactly. Someone's like, oh, did you watch the World's Weightlifting? Everyone's like, what's that? Did you watch the CrossFit Games? Oh yeah. It's like the sport and passion that he had was probably overrun a little bit by just towards the end they used to go in there and it was 90% CrossFitters and he had his like handful of lifters that didn't do CrossFit.
Yeah, and probably didn't excel as much in weightlifting as they could have if they let go of CrossFit, right? Which is hard for him to see. I'm trying to look at it through his eyes. It's like, well, I'm sure he would have looked at me and be like, well, you should snatch 100 kilos every day of the week, but because you're doing all these like burpees, it's like no chance. And he was right.
Yeah, he's look. There's no arguing with that point. You walk in there, you're just like, right, today we got some heavy jerks. You're like, oh, but I ripped my hand. I'll just back squat. I don't want to jerk today because like I got a bad callus. So yeah, I feel for him there.
Yeah. Hey, tell us a bit about the weightlifting comps that you did. I'd love to hear some of the kind of behind the scenes stories of the warm up area and how you prepared and obviously how you went as well.
So there's a bunch of them, but one that really sticks out was like the first nationals that I went to. And, state that I went to. It was at Homebush. And it was still at the time that no one spoke to CrossFitters. Like it was CrossFitters on that side, weightlifters on that side. And I was so nervous for making my weight, which was 77 kilos. I only used to really walk around at, say, 79 maybe. So I had like 2 kilos to cut. And then I was so nervous. I don't think I ate for maybe like 2 or 3 days prior to it because I just had no idea how to cut weight and I didn't know what it meant. That morning, I like did some water loading. Like I was like drinking heaps of water the day before and then like went to the toilet heaps and I was like, I've got to make weight. And then went there on the Saturday morning to weigh in. And I was meant to just be under 77. I stood on it and I was 75.4. And I was like, oh God. I'm like, I could almost go down to 69. Like I cut way too much weight. And I was like, best case scenario, I was 76.9. You know what I mean? And I cut like an extra 1.5 kilos. And I was like, oh shit, I'm going to be so weak.
Need to put that weight back on.
Yeah. So then I was like, I need something. So I just started pounding heaps of water and then weightlifters nutrition. It was like sugar, like eat sugar.
Lollies?
Oh man, I was just hooking into this tub of lollies, like just eating so many lollies, drinking heaps of water. Got into the afternoon. I was in like one of the later sessions, started warming up and I was just like, oh, I feel so sick. I was like, I think I had my sugar high like way too early and then just this huge crash. I was so tired and I was like, caffeine. Like it's the only thing that's going to pull me out of this. So do you remember what NoDoz are? NoDoz? They're the caffeine tablets.
Oh, no.
They're called NoDoz. And I was like, one coffee's not enough. So I had a coffee and I took like 3 NoDoz. So then I was like, huge sugar high, massive sugar crash. I was so bloated because I just drank all this water and I was still like weighed in at 75 kilos. Like everything was going against me. It was horrible. And then I was like, caffeine. So I just jacked myself up on caffeine. And I remember just sitting there, just trembling. And I was like, and then it was state. So I was obviously super nervous. So anyway, like we were saying before, the barbell always goes up in weight. Sitting out the back and they called out my first weight. And I was like, I'm not ready. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm too fucked up. I'm like, just put my weight up. So they took my opener. Yeah, it took my opener up by maybe 4 kilos or something. I think I opened I think I opened at maybe 112, or I think I was meant to open at 108 and I opened at 112 because that 4 kilos put out another like 4 or 5 lifters. So it gave me like an extra 10 minutes, say, roughly, maybe a little bit less.
You probably would have ripped 108 well behind your back.
Man, yep. And then I was like, all right. So ended up opening at 112, hit that, which is like awesome.
Yeah.
And then it like when you're weightlifting, it's completely silent platform by yourself. Not a huge crowd, but like relative to what we get to perform as not professional athletes, like enough people to really make you nervous. Like you're in an auditorium, like it sort of goes up on both sides. And
you're in a one piece.
Yeah, you're in your weightlifting suit, so you're exposed.
Your junk is out.
Yeah, there's enough there to really make you nervous. So anyway, I hit my first lift, which I was like, massive weight off your shoulders. As a weightlifter, if you hit your first one, you're like, okay, I'm in. Because if you miss your first 3 snatches, like I was saying before, you're out of the comp. That's it. You're all over. Hit my first one, and then I was like full of confidence. I was so jacked up on caffeine, and then the adrenaline hit. And then it was just like, so that there, I think I ended up going 120, 155 at that comp, so 275 total. So 120 snatch, 155 clean and jerk at 77. But then, so I won state for my weight division. And then because I weighed in so light, there's a Sinclair, which Sinclair is an algorithm that they've come up with of years and years and years of weightlifting data. It's not just power to weight ratio. They use the world records. They use all this data to come up with your snatch weight, your clean and jerk weight, and what you weigh. And it gives you like a score.
Yeah, I think they did a forest map of all the weightlifting numbers.
The what, sorry? A forest map?
Oh, you haven't listened to the
No,
JR?
no, I haven't seen that.
It's a joke.
Oh, okay. I don't know. And then they like give you a score. And because I weighed in so light at 75, I ended up winning the overall best lifter at state.
Oh, man.
So yeah, I actually
you had the best Sinclair out of everyone.
Best Sinclair. So then you can compare yourself to the 69 versus the 105 plus. And so you ended up winning like my weight division and best lifter there.
Yeah.
And it was like everything that led up to that should have been like missed all 3 snatches, cut way too much weight, drank way too much water, had way too much sugar, jacked myself up on caffeine. Like it was the worst prep ever, and I had like the best result. Went 6 from 6 all my lifts.
That's so good when you go 6 for 6. Eh?
Yeah. Oh, that's
good feeling that must be.
Yeah, I was actually had a pretty good record at weightlifting, going 6 from 6. So I really liked the stage. I was not the best trainer, but like a better performer. Competitor. And there's a lot of people that tend in weightlifting to be the other way around because they're introverted. So they train incredibly well and hit really, really good numbers in training. And then on the platform, they really struggle. And I think it comes down to just that, so like I was saying before, the personality type that's attracted to the sport. Yeah. Whereas me coming out, like I like being in front of crowds and like I can feed off that.
Yeah. So get the adrenaline up.
Yeah. So my lifts, like I would always, like very, very rarely I would miss my third lifts. Yeah, if anything, I was more likely to miss my first than I would be my third, because I knew that was like the time to really make sure it counted. So I had a pretty good record and gone sort of 6 from 6 in weightlifting.
Were your lifetime PBs in the gym or at comps?
Lifetime PBs were in the gym.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Lifetime PBs were in the gym.
What are they? I'm sure everyone's curious.
123 snatch, 158 clean and jerk. So I was 5
and they're all kilos.
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 With weightlifting kilos.
Yep. And that was all at under 77.
Yeah.
So then I think...
what are you saying? Are you over 77 now?
I actually don't know, but...
I don't think you are.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, maybe now. I mean, definitely not when you had your vegan stint.
No, that could have been.
You're probably 69 kilo weight class then.
I don't know what I weigh now, but I'm significantly weaker than what I was.
Yeah. But you've people forget, right, when you hit those numbers. Do a quick summary of what a training week would look like, a general training week for weightlifting. How many times you train, roughly how long sessions were, and how much you're squatting, really.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like I would, when I was like right in the thick of it, I would train 6 days a week. And then typically it's morning and afternoon. So over the whole day, I would say we're in the gym for maybe 3.5 to 4 hours.
A day,
per day. And that's split over 2 sessions. Mornings are always loading, so like heavy loading. So I'd always squat heavy in the morning, whether that's like building up to a heavy double back squat, so like 2 reps, building up to something heavy, or submaximal stuff. So like front squatting for triples. I mean, that's about all you did. And then it was just about
no snatch or clean and jerk in the morning?
No, we never used to snatch. We used to press, squat, and pull. So yeah, that was always in the morning. It was like try to get as much skeletal loading in one session. And the way we used to sort of monitor it as well is like your total volume moved for that day. So to make it really simple, if you squatted 3 singles at 100 kilos, that's 300 kilos worth of loading. So we used to keep an idea of how much skeletal loading we had over a whole session. And then in that session, it was like the way that we squatted is you put 100% intensity into every squat. So it's you unrack that barbell and it might be 60% of your 1 rep max, but it's like, do you mean you treat it like it is a 1 rep max? So it's tighten everything up, big breath, fast squat, like as deep as possible, come up as fast out of the top as possible. So it was when you treat your squats like that, your rest periods go huge as well.
Up, so, just to clarify that a little bit, that can be confusing for the listener when you say that with your squat. So let's take the back squat. You're at 60% of your 1RM, but you treat it like it's heavy and you have a strong intent behind the lift. It means on the way down, it's not fast. It's not like you're just dumping yourself into the bottom. You like brace really tight because you're kind of scared of that weight, right? If it is a 1RM. And so you tighten up and brace solid, and then you go up as fast as you can out of the bottom. Yeah. Don't be an elevator out of control on the way down.
Exactly. That's the last thing that we want. Yeah. So usually when we talk about speed, like especially with squatting, it's all about up, because we don't do any eccentric loading in weightlifting. So we never ride a barbell down. So when we're going down slowly, that's irrelevant to what you're going to get out of your lift. What we worry about is how quickly you can change direction out of the bottom and how fast you can stand up. Because that eccentric loading is not existent in weightlifting, because we pull a bar to our waist and we drop under it and we receive it in the bottom. So you never actually, and that's why you'll never see a Olympic weightlifter do an overhead squat. So when you pop the barbell over the top of your head, there's no such thing as eccentric loading in weightlifting. So you're never riding the barbell down. What you will see in Olympic weightlifting is someone that will start in a set of blocks and they'll start at the bottom of their squat and they'll stand straight up.
Or snatch balance as well.
Yeah, or snatch balance, which is dropping speed under, and then standing up. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of confusion often because we forget, we've done it for so long, both me and you, that sometimes we forget that people have done this for 6 months, a year. And when you talk about the speed of the movement, or even, I was just thinking about our early conversation about the fast lifts like the lifters do. It's with the snatch and the clean and jerk, it's not a fast rip off the floor. That actually works against you with the speed. So it's not that part that's fast. It's the speed where they move under. And that's a super important point, because that's a classic beginner's fault, is ripping the bar off the floor and then the weight hits them and then everything slows down. So it's the opposite.
It is so counterintuitive what you do when you first start, but also very important to learn, you know what I mean, in the early days, because it's really hard to teach speed. So we would when I coach, I let a lot of things go with speed, because if they're trying to be fast, it shows good intent, you know what I mean? And then we let that happen for a while. So say if I have a moderately good weightlifter that rips the barbell off the ground really fast, I'm okay with that for a while. Because it's showing that they're trying to move with intent and speed. And then they reach a certain point where it's like, right, now you got to understand that we build momentum off the ground and we're smooth off the ground, not necessarily slow, but smooth off the ground. And then this part here, this is where I want you to be fast. You know what I mean? That might be from the hip strike to the receiving position or whatever.
That's a good point.
Yeah, you got to let people make a lot of mistakes early. But I would prefer someone to make mistakes trying to be fast, because then it's like, then you can sort of tame the beast. It's like, I remember when Darius, Darius here, I remember when he first started, he had incredible speed straight away. But exactly to your point, everything was fast. He used to rip the barbell off the ground as fast as he could, come up as hard as he could, drop down as fast as he could, then try squat as fast as he could. Like, he didn't know where to implement his speed. So he just did everything super fast. And it was like, okay, let this go for a little while, because we don't want to hinder his speed. We want him to be moving fast. And then when he got enough sort of body awareness and he started to really understand the lift, it's like, all right, this part here, I want it to be smooth. And then I want you to show me how fast you can be in this part of the lift. And then I think that's when he sort of really excelled, is when he figured that out.
Yeah.
That takes so long to figure out.
Oh, it takes years and years. It's not even 6 months. It's definitely several years of lifting, and then when you even when you figure it out, you just still have to work on it for another 10 years.
And that's with people's frustration with Olympic weightlifting is, say there's 10 people in the class, there's 10 different cues that are going to be heard for maybe the same solution. You know, and it's like if you're taking cues that you've heard for someone else and you're trying to implement them into your lift, like it's not going to work. And the worst thing that we can try to do is fix 10 things in someone's lift.
Yeah, it's way too much.
In here, when I look at someone doing a snatch, it's like, right, I'm going to be coaching this person for 5 years. I'm going to try fix one thing in the next 3 or 4 sessions. They're doing 20 things wrong. But if I know I've got this person for 5 years, then we can fix that. But if I try to fix all 10 things now in 2 weeks, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. You know what I mean? Like, if anything, you're just going to scramble their brain and their lifts are just going to stay the same.
And that's such a good point. I think that's important not only for the train, like, because you've been a trainer for a very long time, and I used to be a trainer as well. And I the same. I try to like not overwhelm them with different stuff to work on. And I think study shows that the most someone can get out of an hour session or remember is maybe 3 things.
Yeah.
Maybe. And then, so that's good for us to know, but I also think that's good for the client to know, because we are going to say a lot of cues because there's different cues for different lifters.
Yeah.
But if you're a person in a class and working on your lifting, try and pick 1 or 2, maybe 3 things that you work on. Don't think about everything that gets said.
Yeah. And then it's one thing to remember it, and it's another thing to execute it.
Yeah.
Like, and the first step is remembering it, because soon as you understand those 1 or 2 cues that you need to work on, the first thing is like understanding the cue, and then it's like, okay, I get it. And then the second part's feeling it. And then it's like between 2 lifts, it's like, did you feel a difference? And most people go, no.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you're still there then. Like that's where you're at. You're in that feel period. And then it's like they do 2 lifts again. It's like, did you feel a difference? It's like, yeah, I felt the difference. It's like, okay, now you're in the execution part of it. Now you got to execute that good lift hundreds of times. You know what I mean? So you go from that like understanding the cue into that like feeling the cue. It's like, oh, okay, I felt my hip come through. Like I felt hip contact. It's like, oh, that's good. And then they do the next one. Did you feel hip contact? No, I didn't feel it.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're in execution. You know what I mean? Now you know the difference. Now we got to get that hip strike over and over again.
Yeah.
But over the last couple of weeks running these Olympic lifting classes, I haven't done that for 3 or 4 years, haven't run an Olympic lifting class. And it was like, I wanted to expose everyone to the different ways that we approach the lifts, and then give them some cues to work on. And then it's going to be interesting now. Even today, we had some hang power cleans, and watching the guys come in that had done those classes, you could see them, like a few of them, they knew their cues. It's like, oh, their footwork's working better, or, you know what I mean? They're actually getting their hips, or it's nice to see. It's
about a lot of repetition, right? Because I think for people that have done the course now, I would say in the back of their head, they're doing like, all right, position 1, position 2, like get past the knee, above the knee, like just even knowing that stuff is so helpful when you're training. You might not, or you're probably not going to be a lot better at it in the next month, 2 months. But if you keep reinforcing it again and again, that's when it comes.
Yeah. And it is exactly that. It's just, you got to expose yourself to those good positions over. And there's reasons
10,000 hours.
Yeah. There's reasons why in that training hall, I mean, you see the best weightlifters in the world with an empty barbell for 25 minutes hitting those positions, because they know that if they don't, you know what I mean, that subtle, small change can make a huge difference.
And the coaches are still watching them intently on the barbell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny with CrossFit, when you're exposed to weightlifting through CrossFit, you forget that weightlifting is its own entire sport, and we use elements of it. We very, very rarely, especially in our programming in here, use it as what it is intended to be, which is a 1 RM clean and jerk and a 1 RM snatch in one session with nothing else around it.
Yeah.
That is an entire sport on its own, has been around for thousands of years. Whereas in CrossFit, we use elements of that. We use snatching, but it's not in the way that it's intended. Yeah. We use clean and jerks and variations of clean and jerks, but not in the way that it's intended. So when you're exposed to it, you're like, oh yeah, I can clean and jerk and snatch. And it's like, we can do a variation of it, but very few people can actually execute weightlifting at a high level.
The sport has actually put it more and more in as the way it has been intended to do. Like, you know, at the games when they had just 10 people left, they had like the clean, and like they put it more in as an actual lifting event, which is cool to see.
Definitely. And the best thing to see as well was in the years prior, it was like you've got 30 seconds and they could hit it like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, and do some double unders in between or whatever.
yeah. It's like hit your 1RM and then do 50 pull-ups for time, you know, and it was like, but then you've got to hit your 1RM again. Whereas I think CrossFit has evolved in that as well, because I think the last clean and jerk event at the games
that was like a weightlifting event.
Oh, that was
as close as you can get.
It was better.
Yeah, it was more exciting.
Better. Yeah, it was like, because then they had the head-to-head off the side, which is, you know what I mean? That's the CrossFit spin on it when they did the touch and goes off to the side. But that event, that gets people excited about weightlifting.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get people that excited when they go to a weightlifting comp.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same.
Yeah. Okay, to wrap this up, let's talk about the sessions that you've just been running over the last few weeks. I think 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
3 weeks.
3 weeks? Yep, 6 sessions. What are some of the biggest takeaways for you as a trainer? What were you surprised about with the people that did the lifting, and what stuff do you want to tell the people that did it to take away and continue working on in the next few months?
So, like, I suppose just from my point of view at the moment, like, that was super enjoyable, and thanks for everyone that came along and actually did the sessions. I think some of the big takeaways that the guys are going to get out of that is hopefully, and what I hope they took away from it is just open their eyes to just how technical a clean and jerk and snatch could be. And exactly what we did with those classes was we peeled everyone back to the start. So what the guys that are very good weightlifters, you know what I mean, your Matty Cavs and your Darius, is like they can lift. They're not beginner lifters. They've got years and years of experience in lifting. But then when I stripped them all the way back, they realized that it's like, oh yeah, like those building blocks, we'd forgot about that stuff.
So much stuff.
The Olympic weightlifting, and for the guys that haven't done Olympic weightlifting, and that was like their first exposure to it, like that is perfect. Because if you can have that, I suppose, respect for those two lifts early on and realize just how technical they are and how to get better at them early on in your weightlifting sort of journey, that's going to help so much in years to come. Whereas if you start with really bad habits, haven't been taught, watch YouTube and try it, and then we got to try to change all those bad habits, that's when it becomes time consuming and frustrating for a lot of people. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that I would hope the guys took out of it is like a newfound respect for the little intrinsic sort of movements that they need to understand. And it's not just like this big one movement, you know what I mean? All the little positions. That's what I hope they took out of it anyway.
Yeah.
I forgot what you asked, but that was, hopefully that's what they got out of it.
Yeah. What are some of the things you would recommend for them to keep it up? Because now they've done 6 sessions and each session was roughly an hour and a half, I think.
Yeah.
So how can they keep that stuff at the forefront of their mind and keep working on it and not just having done those sessions and then, you know, it all goes back to normal in January 2020.
Yeah, I think what we touched on before is like taking those 1 or 2 cues per person and really drilling it. So rather than trying to fix the 10 things that we found that aren't maybe perfect, is fixing that 1 or 2. You know what I mean? And those, and they're specific to each lifter. You know, there's not sort of one blanket approach that I can take to everyone.
Yeah.
But the cues that they learn in those sessions, it's like pick 1 and 2 and just drill that and don't expect it to come fast. Because the improvements we're looking for are so small, but they take so long. So 6-8 weeks, you know what I mean? You might have just started to understand it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Step 1.
Yeah, exactly.
10 steps left.
Exactly. So like, don't get frustrated if you're not going to hit a PB in like 6 weeks' time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because realistically, we want you to be a significantly better weightlifter in 2 years' time, not in 6 weeks. And if you drill that stuff, like you'll be super surprised what you're capable of in 2 years' time, rather than like trying to hit a 6-week PB. Yeah.
As a trainer, when I used to do it, I never really cared too much about PBs, and I think you're a bit the same. Like, if I have someone who would do an Olympic weightlifting, you know, program for a while, yeah, obviously you want to see the numbers improve, but I wouldn't really care about like them doing a 1-arm snatch. But if they're moving the barbell better and better at 50 to 75, 80%, like that's what you're trying to coach.
Yep.
100%. So,
and it's inevitable that they're going to PB.
I think so. Yeah.
If you have someone that does 2 months worth of weightlifting and they're moving the barbell significantly better than when they first started, they go hand in hand. PBs and good movement patterns.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They go hand in hand. It has to come.
But if we move bad, there's a ceiling that's very low. It happens quickly.
Yeah, you can hit your athletic potential real fast if you've got some deficiencies in your movement. And what I mean by that,
risk of injury is
super
higher.
Yeah. So there's guys and girls right now listening to this that have had the same clean and jerk PB for 3.5 years. And the reason being, one, like,
we don't do Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah, exactly. We're not Olympic weightlifters.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's a lot of guys and girls in here right now that could significantly improve their 1 rep max if that was something that they wanted without lifting a heavy barbell for the next 3 or 4 months. You know what I mean? If they just go back to movement patterns and they like regress themselves back to getting it right and then they rebuild through that, they'd be really surprised what they could put on. There's lots of guys in here and girls that don't need heavier squats, don't need heavier pulls. They don't need any of that. They just need to like sort of take a bit of a jab at the ego. Instead of going for that 185, you need to be working 95 pounds. And you need to work that consistently. That well. And if any deficiencies there, fix it at 95 pounds. Don't try fix it at 185.
That never works.
Yeah. And then that 185, that turns into 205 and 225.
Yeah, real quick.
And you can see it with the more experienced weightlifters. Our strongest guys and girls in here in Olympic weightlifting, they move the best. They're not our strongest by no means. There's plenty of significantly stronger guys and girls than our heaviest clean and jerk and snatch. And it's because it has very little to do with the strength at this level. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So a couple of things to finish off. Number one, Olympic weightlifting is really fun. And when I understood better the snatch, that was the most impressive movement to me ever because it requires speed, strength, mobility, et cetera, et cetera. It's like a big takeaway for me when I started it. Number two, or not even for just the people that did the Olympic weightlifting class, but even if you're a person doing the normal classes here, but you want to work on your Olympic weightlifting, maybe start taking notice of 2 or 3 things that Sean or Tash or Maddie or any of the trainers tell you during your warm-up with an empty barbell and pick some stuff to work on. So even if you write them down, it's going to be more easy to remember what to work on. And then you can have a look in a couple months' time and see if you got better at them. And hopefully some of those cues can change to something else because you start working on other aspects. And lastly, what is required on the comment section for you to run another weightlifting session or another weightlifting stint? What should people write there?
Well, yeah. So over the last few weeks, I think that we've found some guys that are going to be like committed to it. And I would say like, I love coaching weightlifting and that's not something that I don't like. I'm only going to do, sporadically, but if the interest is there, I'd love to run it. You know what I mean? So maybe the best thing to know is like what times, because
so what time people want to do
times people want to do it, because the best case scenario is we get exposure to as many people as possible. And I think the big takeaway as well that people might not realize is those classes are very different to a CrossFit class.
Very different.
And I intentionally change my coaching style as well. So like I'm different in those classes when I approach weightlifting, and it's I found the last few weeks really enjoyable. So maybe if I could just know what times best suited for people. But if we continue to get 3 or 4 people to them, they probably would dwindle out. Whereas when we first started and we had sort of 12 to 15, if we get that kind of interest in it, I'll definitely keep putting them on. But yeah, if it's 2, 3 people, then we're going to try something else, like some gymnastics or some like Pilates or yoga, or because we want to get as much exposure to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
What time, and if they're interested in doing it, make it known. Otherwise, I can't read your mind.
So comment below if you are interested in doing more Olympic weightlifting. Let us know what time you prefer. And I think that's it. Really, what else was I going to say about the... Yes.
And I would love to run like a little internal weightlifting comp in here.
Oh, yeah. The Mona Gym Weightlift Off 2020.
2020. It won't...
Lift off.
Lift off weight.
Lift off.
The lift off. Mona, lift off.
Yeah. I think that's... And I should say as well, if that might sound really scary for people, but I think it's awesome to put yourself out there. And honestly, no one really cares about what weight you're lifting. When I did my first comp, I was definitely at the bottom of the leaderboard, and really no one would have like cared what was on my barbell, but they cared about how I lifted it.
Yeah.
So even if you feel like, well, I'm not strong enough to do a weightlifting comp, don't worry about that. If you come in here and hit 6 from 6 and you move well, even if it's half the number of what's your close to your 1RM, that'd be really impressive for me. Like I like seeing people do that.
Yep, agreed.
That's a good goal.
2020 lift off.
All right. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Kimbo.
Awesome. Any housekeeping stuff?
Nope. Ask Tash.
Sweet. All right. See you guys on the next one.